Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, the home to so many amazing shows from Nerd Nuptial on a Monday all the way through to Missing Frames on a Sunday. I'm Lee Hutchison, I'm your host for today's episode, and I'm joined by someone pretty special. I remember him so well from my childhood. You know, I'm sure many people still remember him to this day, young and old, and he's performed some amazing shows all around the world promoting the magic of science and what a truly magical thing it is. I'm joined by Tom Pringle, better known as Doctor Bunhead. Hello, Tom, or should I refer to you as Dr. Bunhead?
You can call me Tom, but a lot of my friends actually call me Bun, so you can take your pick. Dr. Bunhead's a bit formal, but Bun and Tom are kind of my usual monikers, so take your pick.
I'll go with Tom. Maybe by the end of this episode, I'll be on familiar enough terms to call you Bun.
Okay, fair enough.
So, one thing we would love to chat about today is sort of the success of the Edinburgh Science Festival. You've had another marvellous run at it. You know, I think you've got quite a consistent spell here at the Edinburgh Science Festival. I'd just love to know how it kind of went this year and sort of the show that you were doing.
It went really well. I was really pleased. We had 2 sold-out shows. We had to move our venue because the students have occupied George Square Theatre, so it was a last-minute move, and it meant we needed an extra day, so that was unadvertised. We were a little bit worried, but we had half an audience in on the last day, so that was a big result. And the puppet shows have gone really well. Again, we're in the National Museum of Scotland, and we had at least 70 people in each show. There were about 10 shows. So well over 700 people came to see the science puppetry, which is really, really lovely to get that younger audience involved in being excited by science.
That's incredible, and it's one of those things. You every year you're back at the festival. It feels like, is it always a challenge for yourself to come up with something new and exciting that kids these days will think, "Wow, I've never seen something like that before." When you know things like YouTube at the click of a button seem to be blowing their minds most days.
Yeah, it's a good question. There is always a pressure to come up with something new, if only just to stop me from getting bored. So I'm always looking to try out new things and have a fresh angle, new flavour. The YouTube thing, though, there is something truly visceral about seeing phenomena up close and smelling it and hearing it that you just don't get off YouTube, no matter how well filmed or spectacular. The drama of someone approaching you with potentially highly flammable collection of bubbles and a naked flame 6 inches away from it just can't be translated through a YouTube clip. So there's something that pulls people back. The live science experience really is quite different to watching it on a video.
Because it's one of those things, obviously, I think it was like 95 that you began performing live. Has there been much change in sort of the way audiences and younger people react and watch a show like this? Or is it harder to compete with that sort of so many things that can appeal to them? They can access games, everything at the click of a button. Have you had to sort of evolve with that, or are they all kind of consistent?
The only thing I've noticed changing is parental sensitivities. What's okay to include, what isn't okay, what some parents might get upset about or not get upset about, whether we're allowed to say fart or not, depends on which country you're in. But kids themselves, the only thing I've noticed with children, I guess, is they become a bit more savvy and self-aware a little younger. Maybe they're 2 years younger than they used to be when they become very self-aware of their image and it's not cool to be in a kids show, that kind of thing. So those are the only real changes that I've noticed. I've not done any great study, but I've seen tens, hundreds of thousands of children, so that's my take on it.
Yeah, you've done events like all kind of around the world, from places like Iceland to New Zealand to USA, and you could probably pick every place on the map. What is it about, say, kind of Scotland and Edinburgh that, you know, we're so known for this science festival? What is it that kind of draws people back to something like that every year? I almost don't hear of sort of events like that in many other countries, for example.
I think, as you may know, science and festival were first stuck side by side in Edinburgh. So the idea of a festival of science was launched in Edinburgh. So they led the way in that regard, and they drew on some really talented people at the early days, and so they created a reputation which others then came to see and copy. And still, people come from all over the world to look at the Edinburgh Science Festival and gain inspiration. And Edinburgh Science Festival has gone from strength to strength, and now they have Edinburgh Festival Ventures, which travels around the world and effectively templates a science festival in a local culture, like, for example, Arab Emirates or something like this. So, there's a lot of factors, I suspect, that have done it. Also, Edinburgh's a really creatively vibrant city. It's kind of just that magical size. It's not too big so that people are disconnected. So there's a huge amount of creative support. If you want to do something in Edinburgh creatively, there are a lot of like-minded people with a good degree of goodwill in them. People like making things happen. I've been very impressed by how people come together and just make things happen. So I suspect those are two big factors.
You were kind of talking about sort of this template that gets shared around the world. Kind of reminds me of your Bright Sparks kind of training program. Can you kind of talk about how that sort of came to be and sort of the successes of it?
Well, I was doing science performance, and I'd created this character, Doctor Bunhead, and this anarchic approach to what was a kind of more traditional form of science demonstration. And I was very interested in the theatricality of it. So at the time I started doing that, it was in many quarters frowned upon. In fact, whilst I was at university, I was actually taken to university court to try and shut down my Science Communication Society that I founded. And there were another groups of pockets of dissent that's claiming that I would be a harm to science and such like, danger to science. And over the years, as the incentives to communicate with different publics for science increased, our budget depends upon public purse, so it became more and more obvious that it was important for scientists to be able to communicate with the press and the publics. So I was asked to start, soon after I'd done it, to start running courses, as it were, or talks. And quickly I realised that in a talk, all that happens is people nod their head and smile and agree with you, but they can't actually do any of it. So my first talk I did at Edinburgh University then became a slightly longer presentation with some interactivity, and it just became more obvious that the only way for people to really get this was to do it. And I always think of the analogy of wood carving, or becoming a joiner and making a beautiful piece of furniture. The instructions are very simple. Cut the wood at the correct angle, join it together, polish it up so it looks nice. But the skill involved in doing that it takes a lifetime. And it's like that with science communication, I feel. The instructions behind it are very simple. What we're trying to do is very simple. But to get to that place where you do it well, and it comes out as a beautiful object that people enjoy to use and to look at, that's a craft, and it takes a lot of time. So I became very interested in the craft and finding shortcuts so that people without the experience could quickly develop. It struck me there were a lot of ways in which you could get people to develop, but I was very interested in getting them good enough to stand in front of an audience, or to write, or to talk in front of a camera without the need to go to drama school or any of these things. So that's as short, I suppose, as I can make it just now.
So, kind of once, like you were saying, that this, this character became born. When you sort of started doing it, that gets crazy to think that people were trying to shun you or kind of take you to university court. It almost feels like, kind of looking back, the creation of this character and this approach was ahead of its time. That this is something that we see adopted more and more these days. These sort of, as you say, sort of stunt science. It's such a fascinating kind of thing to look back on it and that journey.
Yes, I mean, when I started, obviously there was very experienced science communicators in America. They had Bill Nye, and they also had people that inspired me, like James Burke. They're very much traditional. In terms of people giving demonstrations, you had Professor Julia Sumner Miller, who took physics demonstrations and made them very dramatic, what he called dramatic performances on TV, and they were hugely popular in the 60s, really popular, and he was groundbreaking at his time, but he was still very much in the mold of a traditional lecturer, but very enthusiastic. He used very inaccessible language in a lot of ways. The water, as evidenced here, can be seen to be vaporizing, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't simplifying to the extent we would nowadays. And he was using a lot of the didactic teaching approaches you'd expect in a lecture hall, but he was presenting phenomena to a lay audience, a mixed lay audience, a family audience. So, yeah, I suppose it was taking some of that, and then for me it was adding in other inspiration from my youth, and very much that was the anarchic element of things like the Young Ones. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So the Young Ones, and a circus performance called Archaeos, where people were juggling chainsaws. And I just remember being absolutely blown away by the sheer terror of watching people do these things with this sense of really incipient danger. Or it was about to see them chop the hand off at any second. And I loved that tension. I loved that tension, that sense of being on the edge and of not doing things the way they were meant to be done. And so that quickly became, if you like, a theme of Dr. Bunhead, that he would do the things that were naughty. Of course, when you do the things like that, if you do them incompetently, you only get to do them once, because then you either write yourself off out of the gene pool or someone else. Either way, you end up out of a career. So to make things appear that dangerous actually requires an enormous amount of investment in safety and rehearsal and many other things to ironically to get it to appear so dangerous on stage.
I'd love to know about that then. You're talking about sort of your rehearsal. What is your creative process from, say, developing an idea to, say, performing it on stage at the Edinburgh Science Festival, for example? What's your kind of your start to finish? How does that kind of unfold from idea to reality?
There are a number of approaches, but typically the Science Festival approach will start actually with a title, which might sound a little bit strange, but it goes like this. I think, right, what shall I do for next year? I need a good title, because the first thing an audience is drawn to is what it's called. Before that, if they see a good visual, that'll work, but usually it's a title. So the title then informs the content. So if it's Dr. Bunhead versus the world's biggest bogey, there has to be some relationship with bogies in it. And to me, that immediately conjures up things connected with material science, because we're looking at properties of materials. Bogies are sticky and stretchy and such like. So it starts to become a show which is about the properties and uses of materials. But of course, it has to feature a giant bogey in it. So I start to think about how I can do this. So I start with a bunch of titles and I share them around kids and friends and adults and say, what do you like? And I look to see which one makes them laugh or smile. If it makes them laugh or smile, I think this is a good title. Once I've got one which enough people seem to be quite fond of, then I'll start collecting together ideas and demonstrations. So over the years, if you do this over the years, you start to collect together hundreds of different demonstrations that you can use. Some of them classics, which are real crowd pleasers, others which are more peripheral. And I work by pictures, because these demonstrations have a kind of very strongly emotional and visual sense in me. And I just draw little sketches of them, little pencil drawings, and I start juggling them about. So I think, all right, I might have an exploding hot water bottle. Now, can I tie that in? Yes, because the hot water bottle, we've got the material properties of the rubber used to make the hot water bottle. Good, so that connects. What should it fall on the back of? Right, well, we've just had that moment. That's a bit quiet. So I can pull it in then. I should have it towards the end because it's very big. So I start to get a kind of an emotional roller coaster of demos. So there's this roller coaster of emotional states the audience will go through, from enthusiasm, excitement, fear, tension release, and such like. And as I'm blending that in, I'm thinking about the academic journey they're making, the sort of little cognitive trip. So there's a structure that's in there to do with the concepts that are blended into all of this. And then amidst all of that, I'll have a narrative structure, because people follow stories much easier than anything else. So I'll either have little stories that connect together, or one big story that tries to hold everything together. And it'll be a question of pulling all these things together. Then the next stage, once I feel fairly happy with it, is to check out all the demos, make sure they're all working, make sure I'm handling them all. I might look at past videos of performances and remind myself of things that worked and didn't work, because when you're performing, you tend not to notice so much how the audience is responding. But when you watch a video back, you can hear their responses to things and things that you've missed. So I'll do that, and then quite often I'll take it to a school for free and run a few runs there, or take it to somewhere else and basically have a few runs at it. And that's when it really gets knocked about, because you start to go, this doesn't work with that, I need to change this. And finally, you've got something that's ready to show to a paying public. That's an approach that I would use from a title-led development into a show.
That's incredible. So I'm curious as well, like, I know you so well from Brianiac. It was one of my favourite programmes as a kind of child, and it spoke to me so well. And, you know, when I mentioned to a few friends I was going to be talking to Doctor Bunhead, I mean, these people are around my age, late 20s, 30s. Oh, yeah, how's he getting on? And it was just one of these ones, like, the name immediately clicked with them. It doesn't need it to be, let me Google him. Who was that? It was like Doctor Bunhead. So, kind of, how did Brianiac come about? Was that a moment that you thought to yourself that from being shunned almost with this sort of character that you were going to, you know, university, jail, to, you know, mainstream Sky television Sunday nights? How did that kind of come about, and how do you kind of look back on it?
It came about as a fortuitous accident. By the time Brianiac came about, it was 2003. So I was doing really well by then. And there wasn't, I think I was the only freelance science communicator in Scotland, pretty sure, still at that point. And certainly in the UK, there still wasn't anyone else going about doing what I was doing. And I just started doing theatre shows. So I was literally getting this into my first ever theatres. And as best as I could tell, that had never been done before, because you couldn't light a candle in a theatre. And I was asking to literally blow things up. And so this was terrifying for theatres, absolutely terrifying. But I was picked up by a guy from Clear Channel who do all the advertising, and he gave me my break into theatre, and that led to another one. And getting back to the Brianiac thing, I was doing the Fringe Festival, and because of the nature of the demonstrations I was doing, they're very photogenic, and the press are usually interested. So I used to get approached, and still do occasionally, by the press, quite a lot then, to do a picture. And a particular guy said to me, would you come and take a picture on top of Carlton Hill by the big Roman fake Colosseum, the facade up there? And I said, oh dear, it's a Fringe, it's very, very busy. But he was taking a picture for the Times, so it could potentially be a really great shot and great publicity. So about 11 o'clock at night, absolutely exhausted, I went up there with a pile of giant glass tubing and all manner of hydrogen sulfide, carbon disulfide, and some nitrous oxide and a bunch of other stuff, and made this classic demonstration called the Barking Dog, which is a beautiful blue flame which shoots down a tube and accelerates and becomes near supersonic. So it makes this whoop sound as it goes down. And we shot it and shot it and shot it. It was really miserable. But eventually he managed to get the lighting and everything just right, that we had the spectacular photo, which he was convinced would be on the front page of the Times. So the next day, it just so happened, was the same day that Red Bull had someone fly across the English Channel using one of these wingsuit type things, which was blew my picture out of the water. So that was on the front page, but I was still in the Times with this fabulous picture. And the day after that picture was published, I was contacted by someone from London saying, would you come and do a press launch for Granada Television? Sky TV. Granada made it, Sky broadcast it. And I was like, no, I can't, I'm really sorry. I'm just too busy. This was in the Fringe Festival. And they said, well, we're launching this new program. It's called Brianiac, but we don't have anyone who can do any of the things that we're going to do on the program. We need it for a press launch. You're the only person we know who can do this stuff. And you've got, I can see you do nice things. They're great. I said, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And so he kept on. I said, listen, I'm just absolutely exhausted. It takes so long to keep one of these shows on the road. You'd have to pay me something ridiculous, like £2,000 to be worth coming down there. And this was back in 2003. And he said, oh, all right then. And I sort of pretended that I wasn't absolutely gobsmacked. My internal reaction was, what? What? They only wanted me to perform for 10 to 15 minutes. So I was absolutely staggered. And then I just painted myself into a corner. I had to do it. So it's still to this day the most expensive gig I've done. And I turned up there, and it was quite terrifying. There were these top executives from all over the TV programs. It was very well attended, and there were all sorts of things. People had scorpions being chucked down their jumpers and all sorts of weird stuff. They were promoting all these different new shows. And there was I, this guy with a lab coat and a hot water bottle to explode and a potato bazooka to fire potatoes through a spud cannon. And so I just went, right, I've got to make an audience here. And nobody was interested in the stall at all. So I just went into my best busking mode I could manage. And as they say, ballsed my way through it and put on this performance and pulled in an audience and then grew the audience and built the drama and pulled people in. And before I knew it, I had the whole room watching these two things happen. And after that, I think it was a commissioning editor or something, I'm not quite sure, came up to me, a woman, and she said, so are you going to be on Brainiac? And I said, no, not at all. And she said, oh, all right, okay. Well, would you like to be on it? I said, well, yes, that sounds good. She said, okay, let me get onto that for you. So shortly after, I was contacted by a guy called Richard Greenwood, who asked me if I'd like to write material for them. And I said, I would not like to write material for them unless they let me perform it. Because for me, there was no point giving over all the stuff that I'd worked out.
A nervous moment for you, that gamble of write their material, or I could double down, write it and get on screen. Was it a moment of self-confidence, a bit of worry for you?
At that point, it was just no, you're not having my effing material. It was just like, no, I'm fed up with people asking me to just give them my material. It's like asking Darren Brown, can you just tell us how you do your stuff so we can do our version? Yeah. So it was more of stop asking me for my material. It takes me a long time to work out how to do this and all the risk assessment that goes with it, and let me demonstrate it to you. So yeah, it was more belligerence, I think.
So when you found out that you were going to kind of be on Brainiac and then the show kind of continued to grow and grow, what did you think the sort of success of that was? And did you sort of feel any pressure on the show to be constantly, it was a weekly show, so it's got to be something new and exciting each week to grab people's attention. What was that experience like for you?
The show originally, to be honest, once I knew more about it, I was very reluctant about being involved. I thought, this is dumbing down science. Its title is Brainiac Science Abuse, and when I talked to them, it was very clear I wasn't going to be able to get much science in at all, and I just thought, I don't think I want to be part of this. And then a little thing inside my head said, no, give them a chance, and your job is going to be to reduce your science content to one sentence. You're going to make sure that no matter what bit of airtime you've got, you're going to get that one good sentence of science across. So I set it as a challenge. And we did series 1, and they edited out a load of stuff that I was very proud of, but they said it was too scientific, too teachery and such like, which upset me a bit, but not, it didn't fit their format, to be fair. And I was all set for that being the end of it when they said, do you want to do series 2? And in series 2, I thought, oh God, guys, you're scraping the barrel now. I mean, we've done all the big stuff. You've decimated the content I've given you, rejected 90% of it. And I started getting emails. And I started getting emails from chemistry teachers and physics teachers especially saying, thank you. There are kids in my class who have not been interested in science at all, ever. And suddenly they're interested in science. And they just ask, can we do Brianiac, miss? Can we do Brianiac, sir? And for me, I was so happy. That made me so happy. It was girls and boys wanting to do science because it was presented in that way. And that was, I just thought, okay, right, I'll stick with this. So that's how it grew, really.
And was that moment you feel that all these kind of years you put in, you know, the graft, the risk assessment, trying to be taken seriously, that you felt, this is what I've been working towards, this is it all paying off now?
I don't know that I had that thought. I just thought that this is great. This is doing something worthwhile. It makes me very happy to see that the teachers were happy, that the kids were enjoying science. And I'm interested in learning. I'm interested in all learning. So I just happen to be most passionate about science. But if I was a Latin teacher, I would passionately be promoting Latin. I'm just fortunate that science in our current culture is, after maths and English, personal health, viewed to be the most important thing people should be learning. So there's a lot of support for people learning it. But personally, I'm just interested in the joy of learning, philosophy, just this love of knowledge. So when people have that enjoyment, it makes me feel very happy. And I suspect it kind of tickles a part of me which remembers my teenage years standing outside the chemistry classroom as if it were Christmas. Yeah. Every chemistry class, I sat outside waiting for John Walters. We used to call him Trudge because he had this stuff he put in his hair, True Gel. And he was a ferocious man and a brilliant teacher. And every time I went in there, I felt like the world got bigger, that I understood more, the world made more sense. And science was safe. You could trust it. You knew you had the right answer. And in a world that was unsafe and unreliable and full of surprises, science was a platform, an anchor for me. And I derived enormous joy from understanding how things worked and knowing that I could rely on these things. And when I see someone have that penny drop moment or joy, I guess it throws me back maybe to that. I don't know, but it gives me huge satisfaction to see the joy in others at learning a thing or enjoying knowledge.
Do you feel that when you kind of look at, say, the youth of today that come along to your shows and the people that were inspired and loved the science that you put on to screens and into households, and that inspired those kids in science classes that perhaps just weren't engaging with the topic, do you feel that gives you a lot of hope for the future? You know, we live in a period of time where kind of the politics of science is often dismissed, you know, climate change, the environment we're living in. There seems to be a real pull between the generation that want to change the world through science and an older generation perhaps that want to deny science. What's your kind of hope for the future then when you see these young people engaging?
I see a massive shift in the awareness of younger children and the sensitivity to the environment that was never present when I was a child. And I suspect that's because the people who have become their teachers are much more attuned to it. And it's just passing on generation after generation. When I was a child, we at most were aware of starvation in African countries and such like, but the idea of there being a problem with the climate and that we were having this impact, anthropogenic CO2 emissions being the cause of raising global temperatures, these kind of things, they weren't in the air. I mean, science wasn't even something I did at primary school until we played around with a few measuring sticks and stuff in our final year. So it really has grown enormously. And there's one thing I see is that children, when, especially in primary schools, they always ask for more science. They absolutely love the exploration through science. So yes, I am very much encouraged by that, and also the quality of teaching. Teachers get knocked, but I see so many teachers, and they work so hard, and they care so much. And you see that translate in where the kids end up. And of course, we compare with other things, with PISA tables and all of this, and say, oh, we're behind Italy, but we're in front of here, that, and the other place. But compared with where we were, which is perhaps the most important mark of how we're doing, I personally think there's been a huge shift, a much softer generation, a more sensitive to other people and to the environment and to our impact on the environment. So I feel very hopeful about the children that are going to grow into adults.
That seems like the perfect dot to end it on. Hope your hope is rewarded. So, Tom, if people wanted to reach out to you to find out kind of any of your shows that you've got on, any events on in the future, where can people find you online and performing?
The easiest thing, I guess, would be just to go to Facebook and look up the real Dr. Bunhead. You can't look up Dr. Bunhead because someone else has already pinched that site, ironically. I can't be Dr. Bunhead, but I can be the real Dr. Bunhead. So that's the easiest. My website is woefully out of date. I'm still in the middle of trying to sort it out, and I've been in the middle of trying to sort it out for about 10 years now. So I'm embarrassed about my website. I just never get around to sorting it out. But Facebook is where I'm posting what I'm doing, where I'm going, that kind of thing, keeping up to date. And one day, when I get less busy, I'll take care of the website.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure to talk with a science legend like yourself. You know, if someone had told me this years ago this would happen, it would have blown my mind. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing to raise awareness of science and make it something that people can engage with. It's an incredible thing you're doing. So, you know, I take my hat to you.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's been a great interview.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.